Hi, Lou here to talk about regional conventions, both regional game conventions and regional conventions for other types of fandom, such as science fiction fandom, where there is a game segment. And I have a few examples to talk about and show you some photos. So what's a regional game convention? I use this term for a convention that attracts people from within a single state or a few states and is typically attended by up to 200 people. Usually it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday convention, usually at a hotel. My two examples from February 2016 are Rapier Con in Jacksonville, Florida, and Prototype Con in Kissimmee, Florida. And what about regionals that are not primarily game conventions? Well, geek conventions of all types are experiencing a rapid rise in attendance. Frequently, these conventions now combine several interests. So you have science fiction, comics, costuming, anime, video games, tabletop games, film, and more. Gen Con, which is one of the largest game conventions, actually includes all of those topics. It's more of a story convention than a game convention. My example here is a convention in Gainesville, Florida, SwampCon. What's the attendance of this kind of convention? It varies, but usually it's a lot more than 200, often in the thousands. So first, I'm going to talk about Rapier Con, which was 14 years old this February. Formerly it was in June. This was the first year it was in February, so the attendance was down to about 150 from the typical 200, and you might expect it'll go back up to about 200 next year. Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the DoubleTree at Jacksonville Airport, organized by the Jacksonville Garrison, which doesn't seem to have many other activities, and in particular Chip Coffee. It's a tabletop miniatures convention, board game convention, card game convention, both war games and Euro-style games. Part of the convention is in a ballroom where my photos were taken, and the rest is in various other rooms throughout the hotel. Rapier Con has one of the lower entry fees I've seen for a game con, with an option to pay for just one day, which is not always the case. There are lots of local vendors, but no publishers. And I don't usually talk about food, but the hotel food service is really poor. Unfortunately, people are reluctant to leave because they think they might lose their parking spot. So the 15th annual Rapier Con is scheduled for February 10 to 12th, 2017. Then we have Prototype Con, of which the first annual, quote unquote, was held at the Ramada in Kissimmee, Florida. Unfortunately, that's on a 3 lanes each way highway to Disney World, where the traffic is really heavy all the time. But once you get into the con, which is held in one large ballroom, you won't be much affected by the location. This convention also is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, one entry fee for the entire con. I counted about 125 people at one time on Saturday afternoon, so I'd guess that over 3 days it might have reached 175 unique attendees or even more. Prototype testing is the major activity at the convention. There's no vendors to speak of, though there were a few publisher representatives present for the speed dating, quote unquote. In speed dating, a designer signs up to lay his game out on a table and talk to publishers in 5-minute segments to give a little 5-minute pitch. And the publishers rotate around to the various tables. This was done Saturday evening. Occasionally, licensing of a game results from this kind of activity. Now, Friday evening, when I wasn't there, there were talks with Richard Borg, a designer of Command and Colors, among other things, and with the Dice Tower guys, Tom Vasel and company, who left Saturday afternoon. Richard was still there Saturday evening. Now, there were tables set up all over the ballroom so that people could reserve a spot, lay out their prototype, recruit players who could sign up ahead of time, and play the game. Occasionally you could see a published game being played, but almost everything that was being played was a prototype. It was very much on the Euro, or at least non-war game side. I think there were about 3 war gamers present, including myself, and 2 war games, including a version of my new 3rd edition of Britannia. The other thing that happened to me personally was Jason Levine, out of the blue, I didn't even know who he was, tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I would give an interview for the Dice Tower. And I said, well, I was talking to guys. I said, well, how about at such time? And he said, well, we're all leaving in a few minutes, so we got to do it now. So I went over, and there's the URL on screen in case you want to listen in for 13 plus minutes. Now, SwampCon is the non-game convention with a big game segment. This was the 5th annual SwampCon at the University of Florida, where the name is the Gators, and the swamp is what the Gators call their football stadium, which is just across the way from the Student Union, which housed much of the convention. It's organized by anime fans, but it includes lots of costumes, board games, Magic the Gathering, video games, Pathfinder, and so forth. There are panels and costume contests and other anime-related events. I didn't go to the buildings where Magic and Pathfinder were. I just stayed in the Student Union, where there were lots of folks wandering around in costume. It's a free convention on Saturday and Sunday, but you have to get a ticket, even though it's a free convention. And my photos are primarily of the tabletop segment. So you don't need to look for a big, well-known convention to have a good time. Some of these conventions have less than ideal publicity behind them. You have to hunt for them. I've given examples from Florida, but I can think of 4 regional game conventions in North Carolina, quite apart from several science fiction fantasy conventions that accommodate gaming. So there are lots of choices if you live in a fairly populous area. Thanks for listening.